Salve, Mika, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Vergil's third Eclogue, lines 60 through 65. But first, last time in Vergil's Eclogue. Here's our rubric, everything that we were looking for as we go. Let's get started. Ab ioe principium musae, ioes omnia plena, ille colit terras, illi mea carmina curae. Et me foibos amat, foibos sua simpur apud me, munera sunt lauri et suave rubens hyacinthus, malo me galatea petit, lasciva puella, et fugit ad salices et se cupit ante videre. So we have Demoitus beginning, and this is the dedication, so this is before they're getting into their poetry official. I think this might be the beginning of the lines back and forth between the two. And Demoitus begins as one should, as a proper Roman citizen, with ab ioe. So ab plus the ablative. This comes from Jupiter Iois. It's an unusual name because it's not Jupiter, Jupiteri, or something like that. Singular, masculine, chief of the gods. And then principium with this is functioning, I believe, adverbially. So firstly, foremost, from Jove, from Jupiter, firstly. And then for Musa, we actually have two options. With the punctuation, this is going to be vocative, plural, feminine, which makes sense. He's giving a song, he's giving a poem. The muses make sense to be speaking directly to them, as poets very often did. But the other option, if the punctuation is wrong, since there was no punctuation back in Vergil's day for this, they could also be genitive. And then they would probably be owning principium. Principium wouldn't be functioning as an adverb, and instead would be from Job, first of the muses, or maybe the idea being like the first thing that is the care for the muses, maybe. I don't know. But green and yellow offers either option. I'm going to go with the adverbial. I don't know that it makes much of a difference. Moving on, though, Iois. Here we have is for genitive, singular, masculine, and then omnia plena, omnia with ia is clearly a nominative or accusative, plural, neuter, and then plena is modifying that. We have no verb in this clause, just like we have no verb in this clause. So declaration again, all things full of Job. The idea might be that Job, I don't know if Vergil is trying to say that he's the creator of all, but he is over all at the very least. But plena takes the genitive, which I should probably note. So Job, at the very least, is connected to omnia through plena. All things full of Job. It occurred to me while I was writing that omnia, being the neuter, is probably going to be referring to the songs, so it's all songs are full of Job. Not Job, and I keep saying that too. Jove. Apologies. Moving on to the next line, ille, illud, nominative, singular, masculine, referring back to Jupiter. Colit, this is the verb we saw before. It means to be concerned for, but really to till. It's farming language, which makes sense coming from Demoitus and Meliboeus. So with the it, that's a third person singular off the present stem. This is colere, and I think colui is the perfect active and indicative, taking the accusative, which we find with terras. So that one cares for, he tends to all lands, making sure that the crops grow. A very important thing for the pastoral people. Ili, same demonstrative there. This time, though, it's the dative, singular, referring back to the masculine, though this is identical for masculine and neuter. And then mea carmina curai. Mea modifying carmina, mea being a possessive adjective, carmin, carminis, where we have the E change into an I when you get to the rest of the forms. The A tells us nominative or accusative plural. We have a dative here. There's no verb again, which is very interesting. This is the only verb. And the only verb is when Jove is acting. So everything else is put to a lesser degree, less emphatic degree, I guess. Maybe. But anyway, so this would be my songs, kurai, ili, are a care, or are dear to Jove. But note that we have the AE. We don't want a nominative. These two are functioning as the subject of this sentence, or really Carmina is. So kurai with the genitive is owning this. And what we might have then is a genitive of specification. So my songs, my careful songs to Jove, so a dedication is the other option. If it were not the other option, is the more probable option. If it were to be what I said initially, my songs are dear to that one, kurai would have to be kura. But then that would break with the meter of the line, I believe, not actually knowing what the meter is. So genitive of specification is what I'm going to go with. Moving on to Meliboeus' own dedication, and me being the accusative because amat, once it has its object, don't need to parse it. We've seen it enough there. And then us for the nominative singular, again, no need to parse. Phoebus is the name for Apollo. We've already been through Muse, I think. Jove that's not one that I'm going to look into, but Phoebus, real quick. This one's pretty easy to find out. It comes from Phoebos, which just means radiant one. And Apollo being the messenger of Jupiter, makes sense that he would be radiant. Moving on to the next clause, we have Phoebo. This is a normal second conjugation, dative or ablative singular masculine. So we want to look at the verb or the context of the clause to figure out which of those two make most sense. Sua, this could be nominative singular or could be accusative plural. Since this is a possessive adjective, the plural makes more sense. Because when you put possessive adjectives in the plural, it speaks about the, what would it be, not corporate, the conglomerated things of whoever is the referent. Very often it's in reference to the military or maybe legal team. I don't know if that happens in Latin, but the idea would be one's people. So to or with Phoebus, his own people, his own things maybe, and it is usually going to be in the neuter, even if it is talking about people. Semper, an adverb, but I'm going to have to leave that alone until we have the greater context of the rest of the sentence. Apud, prepositional phrase. Apud takes not dative. It's going to be either accusative or ablative, which is what's always the case for prepositions, and I really should know this one. I'm going to have to look that up because I didn't write it down and I don't remember. Apud takes the accusative. I have been reminded, so that makes me accusative singular common, referring back to Meliboeus. Prepositional phrase is going to close here because munera goes with sunt as our verb. So this is munero. No. Munero is a option. There's also muneror. The verb appears both as an active form and as an opponent form. So as the active with sunt, this would be the fourth principal part. So munerus, munera, munerum. Sunt making it the perfect passive, paraphrastic, third person plural at the very least. And it means to render honor. So in the active, If it were from the active form as its base, then this would be are rendered honor. And we would take sua as the subject, sunt wanting the nominative plural neuter. So his own things are rendered honor. Then we'd have to say by Phoebus. But I don't think that is necessarily makes much sense. So the other option is that this is from munaror, the deponent version of the verb, in which case we just take the active meaning and all apparently passive form. So all his things always, apud with me, have rendered honor to Phoebus in the dative. But I'm going to write down both translations as both are equally possible. Then we move on to the next part of the clause where we get more subjects to go with munera sunt, sua being the first one, apud me possibly linking with the sua or possibly linking with the Phoebus. So all his things, Phoebus with me, I don't think that makes as much sense as apud going with sua. But lauri, we have that long I for nominative plural, and this is actually feminine. And then hyacinthus, US, this word that we've seen before. Lauri is bay trees, and then hyacinthus, there are three options that the green and yellow mentions. We have the corn flag, we have the martagon, I think that's how it's pronounced, but I have no idea, and the red asphodel. Each of them are red because of Rubens. This is nominative singular, and it's both masculine and feminine, but hyacinthus is masculine, so masculine modifying that. They're red. The corn flag appears red. Mortagon does. The asphodel doesn't always, but in this case we do have the red one. And then the only thing remaining is what is suawe. Suawe comes from suawis, suawe, so this should be a nominative or accusative singular neuter, but no neuter, sua's too far away, and it's plural. So what it turns out is that suawe sometimes appears with the e form modifying a nominative masculine when in poetic. So it's unusual. And then finally we get into what I believe is the beginning of Demoitus's poetry. Malo, I believe we've seen that before. This is the word that is often used to refer to the apple. It can also mean peach, pomegranate, or quince. I think I'm just going to go with apple. We have dative or ablative. And it is singular neuter. Me is going to be accusative or ablative. And Galatea, with that A, is nominative singular feminine. Our subject with petit, it for the third person singular, peto, petere. And this might have the same exact form of the perfect tense. I'm not sure. But I'm going to go with present, active, and indicative, and it means to seek. But what we actually have going on here is Galatia with, so it's going to be ablative, to an accusative. Galatia seeks me with an apple, and this is a curious thing that the green and yellow talks about. Apparently back in the day, you would throw apples or peaches, pomegranates, or quinces at people you wanted to court. Yeah, so she's chucking fruit at him, basically saying, pursue me. That's kind of funny. Not less funny is the next two words. Lasciva, it means exactly what it looks like. So lascivious, we also have playful, if you wanted to do the watered down translation. Wanton, petulant is another one, maybe. And then puella, this one modifying puella, nominative singular feminine, going with Galatea, an easy girl apparently. At fugit, it for another third person singular, so I'm just going to mark that off. Prepositional phrase, et se can't be part of it because cupit, again not going to parse it, simple present, se being the object of cupit, closes our prepositional phrase here. We also need et connecting the two verbs of cupit and fugit, so it can't connect two objects with the preposition. This would ruin our two different clauses with their independent verbs. So odd plus accusative, singular, feminine, and a solix, or a solix maybe. That might be the nominative, I'm not sure. But that's willow. I don't remember if we've seen this word for willow before. And flees to the willows, et, she desires herself. Ante, can't really take this as an object, so ante is functioning adverbially, which means telling us time. And videri, this comes from video. We have our, with the I, the present passive infinitive. So she desires herself to be seen, but when does she desire it? Before. I don't know if this means before fugit, or maybe it just means in the order of things, she wants herself to be seen, specifically by Demoita. So bragging again. So one final thing before we take a look at this in its own context, and that was, what does Galatea mean? This is going to be a guess, as there wasn't any real clear indication, but I have two options. So Galatea, notably the E is long. The Greek appears to be te, the diphthong. Yeah, put that accent right. So the EI makes this E in the Latin long. One suggestion is that this comes from, just about drew a lambda. There we go. Galene, and Galene is stillness of the sea, but there's not much in common between Galatea and Galene. You get the nu versus the tau, an eta instead of an alpha. I know those can sometimes switch, and especially this diphthong and the eta can sometimes switch, so I guess there's possibly a relation. But another option is that it comes from Galation, Galairon. Those two words, I believe, are synonymous, and there's another one, but it doesn't start with a gamma. It's an entirely different thing. It's just another word for the same thing. And these two together mean straw, like you would lay down in a barn, or garden herbs. Notably, Galatea in, I think it's Greek poetry, is the name of a sea nymph. Which would then argue for the Galene being the origin, stillness of the sea. That's appropriate for a sea nymph. Whereas Galataion, straw, doesn't make much sense for a sea nymph. But then we are in a rustic setting. And why would you have a presumably shepherdess or something like that named after the sea when you're up in the mountains taking care of the animals? It makes more sense for it to be named straw, maybe for the color of her hair, or garden herbs, especially considering what a lot of the other names have meant thus far. So I don't know, either option. If we run into her again and I bring it up, I've got it noted in my book. So let's take a look at this in its own context. From Jupiter, first of all, muses, all things, meaning songs, full of Jupiter. That one cares for lands, to that one my careful songs. And me Phoebus loves, to or by Phoebus, his own things or people always with me render or are rendered honor, bay trees and sweet red hyacinth. With an apple, Galatea seeks me to court her, licentious girl, and flees to willows and firstly desires herself to be seen. So she wants to be pursued. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope taking a look at this has been helpful for you, and I hope that you have a very good day. Wale.